in the first part of last year, I've been doing just some background research on space, and well, let me talk a bit about that. So, essentially, I was trying to figure out why we had not made more progress since Apollo. In the 60s, we went from basically nothing, not being able to put anyone into space, to putting people on the moon, and developing all the technology from scratch to do that. And yet, in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, we've kind of gone sideways. And we're currently in a situation where we can't even put a person into low Earth orbit. And that doesn't really gel with all of the other technology sectors out there. The computer that you could have bought in the early 70s, would have filled this room and had less computing power than your cell phone. And so just about every sector of technology has improved. Why has this not improved? So I started looking into that. Initially, I thought, well, perhaps it's a question of funding, and that funding can be garnered by really marshalling public support. So I thought, well, one way to get the public excited about space would be to do maybe a privately funded robotic mission to Mars. And so we figured out a mission that would cost about $15 to $20 million, which isn't a lot of money, but it's about a tenth of what a low-cost NASA mission would be. And the idea was called Mars Oasis, where we'd put a small robotic lander on the surface of Mars with seeds and dehydrated nutrient gel that would hydrate upon landing, and you'd have plants growing in Martian radiation and gravity conditions. And you'd also be maintaining essentially a life support system on the surface of Mars. And this would be interesting to the public because they tend to respond to precedents and superlatives. And this would be the furthest that life's ever traveled and the first life on Mars, so pretty significant. And then when I started looking at launch vehicles, the lowest cost vehicle in the US is Boeing's Delta II, which costs about $50 million. And that's a bit steep, what we were trying to do. So I made 3 visits to Moscow, to Russia, to look at buying a Russian launch. And it's actually pretty interesting going to Moscow to negotiate for a refurbished ICBM. If on the range of interesting experiences, that's pretty far out there. But we actually did get to a deal, but there were so many complications associated with the deal that I wasn't comfortable with the risks associated with it. So when I got back from the 3rd trip, I thought, well, why is it the Russians can build these low-cost launch vehicles? Because it's not like we drive Russian cars, fly Russian planes, or have Russian kitchen appliances. And when's the last time you bought something Russian that wasn't vodka? So I think the US is a pretty competitive place, and we should be able to build a cost-efficient launch vehicle. So I put together a feasibility study which consisted of engineers that have been involved with all the major launch vehicle developments over the last 3 decades. And we iterated over a number of Saturdays in the beginning of last year to figure out, well, what would be the smartest way to approach this problem of not just launch cost, but also launch reliability. And we came up with a default design. And that actually, sort of fortunate timing, that feasibility study finished up right around the time that we agreed to sell PayPal to eBay. So coincident with that sale, I moved down to LA, where there's actually the biggest concentration of aerospace industry in the world. It's actually the biggest industry in Southern California, much bigger than entertainment or anything else. I was living in Palo Alto for about 9 years before that. So just to talk a little broadly about space and where things are today. Obviously, US government manned exploration is not in a great place. We've got the 3 remaining shuttles are grounded. It looks like first flight might only be a year from now, if that. And we've got a vehicle that is incredibly expensive and really quite dangerous. It's, for reasons mentioned there, it's got a side-mounted crew compartment, so if there's an explosion, that's basically instant death. You've got solid rocket boosters, which once you ignite them, you can't turn them off. And there's something fundamentally dangerous about premixing your fuel and oxidizer, I think. And then you've got wings and control surfaces. When you re-enter, you've got to maintain a precise angle of attack even a momentary variance in that can break the whole vehicle apart. So, and then of course it's got no escape system. So if anything does go wrong, you're toast. And that you've got a cost that is really pretty hard to fathom. The shuttle program, when you add up all the pieces, is about $4 billion a year. And so you can divide $4 billion by the number of flights, and that'll tell you what the cost is. And if there's, say, 4 flights a year, which they haven't been for a while, then you're talking about $1 billion a flight. The plans for the immediate future are obviously we've got to continue building the space station. So we're going to keep flying the shuttle, but I think it's probably going to be the minimum number of shuttle flights that we need to launch. The long-term plans are to build something called orbital space plane. And I say plane in quotes because one of the options is a capsule. So it should be called, maybe orbital space thing. But the basic idea is to have something that's hopefully a little cheaper and a lot safer than the space shuttle. So in particular, it's going to have an escape system. So if something does go wrong, you can abort to safety. The downside is that while it might be a little cheaper, it's still going to be pretty darn expensive. The estimated cost per flight of orbital space plane is somewhere in the region of $300 to $400 million a flight. And of that amount, just $200 million alone goes to Boeing for the Delta IV Heavy expendable booster. It's a $15 billion development effort and expected to be completed in 9 or 10 years. Now, typically things have not been under budget and under time. So it's unlikely, I think, given historical precedent, that it will stay within $15 billion and the 2012 timeline. And a bit about what's going on elsewhere in the world. In Russia, this is really, the Soyuz is our only access to space station. It's considerably cheaper, considerably safer. The Soyuz has a very good track record. The crew is top-mounted. It has an escape system. There are no wings or control surfaces to go wrong. Overall, it's a pretty good system. And the estimated costs are about $60 million a flight, which is more than an order of magnitude less than the space shuttle. The thing that constrains them, obviously, is the weakness of the Russian economy. It's very hard for them to embark on ambitious programs with an economy the size of Belgium. So China is probably the most interesting thing that's going on in space. This month, China is expected to be only the third. It's expected to launch their first person into space. They'll make them only the third country ever to put someone in orbit. They've put a lot of money and effort into this program. If anything serves as a spur for human space exploration, it is likely to be China's ambitions in space, and hopefully a sense in America that we want to at least keep up with China. And they have grand ambitions beyond just low Earth orbit. They're planning on setting up a space station, putting a base on Mars, and eventually sending humans to Mars. So what's happening in the US that I think might ultimately surpass all of that stuff is entrepreneurial space activities, where things are led by the spirit of free enterprise